Released in 1998 for the PlayStation, Resident Evil 2 was a direct sequel to the first game. Development of 2 started almost immediately after the first was released, but was scrapped when it neared completion. As an apology, Capcom released Resident Evil Director's Cut, which originally came with a demo for what would become the now complete version of 2. 2 originally came on 2 discs, making it twice the size of the first. Each disc contains the first and second scenarios of one of the playable characters. Disc 1 is Leon, and Disc 2 is Claire. The approach to scenario is that these two characters are moving throughout their specific routes at the same time, as opposed to Resident Evil, where it was either Chris or Jill going through the mansion, but never both. I'll talk about the scenario specifics a little bit later, as completing one character's scenario opens up a second one for the other character. Each character's story is unique, despite them both starting in a similar fashion. Both Leon and Claire enter Raccoon City late one night to find it overrun with zombies. Leon is late for his first day at work, and Claire is looking for any information on her brother, Chris, who went missing after the events of the original Resident Evil. Story has a more important role in this game, and as such, Leon and Claire feel better defined as characters. Leon in particular, who had more dev time than Claire since he was in the original scrapped version of the game too. It's a good change, considering one of the original game's biggest flaws was how it presented its story.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
Much like in the first game, Resident Evil 2's opening cinematic is important in setting the tone. Unlike the first game, though, Capcom chose to forego using live action in favor of pre-rendered cutscenes this time. The transition from these cutscenes to the in-game graphics is much less jarring and more believable. It doesn't create the same confusion the first game did with swapping how it visually presented itself. Resident Evil 2 has a distinct cartoon-like style with its smooth textures and bright colors that remains consistent throughout the game. To be fair, Resident Evil 1 had a similar setup. All the main characters had simplistic outfits identified by color, but then that clashes with the higher detailed, super realistic feel it looked like it was going for. While the graphics for both of these games haven't aged very well, I'd argue that Resident Evil 2 has come out better in the long run. Of course, it's not without its hiccups either. Leon's face is probably one of the best examples of this, as it fits into an area closer to the uncanny valley than, say, stylized. The in-game graphics are a big upgrade over the first games too. Characters' faces and outfits are much more detailed, showing things like injuries or defined facial traits more clearly. The pre-rendered backgrounds also look a lot better, and that's because there's a lot more dramatic lighting going on. In the first game, the lighting was very ambient. A lot of places were covered in light and very few areas were in shadow unless it was painted on with the pre-rendered backgrounds. Resident Evil 2 has multiple areas with varying levels of light and shadow, and that helps lend to the dramatic tension the game aims to create. Another improvement Resident Evil 2 has over the first game is its quality of writing and voice acting. The script is better constructed, and the actors reading their lines actually sound invested in their characters. It leads to more believable dialogue and less destruction of mood.
Okay, I say we leave him in there. Does anyone know where they put the key to this cell?
I have it right here, officer. But I'm not about to leave this cell. Those zombies aren't the only things crawling around out there.
Much like the graphics though, there's a couple of hiccups here and there, but overall I don't feel like it's enough to ruin the experience. I'm just saying, it's easier to care about your characters and their plight when they sound like this.
Take it easy. We're inside Umbrella's secret lab. I'll go find something to treat that wound, so just rest here in the meantime.
But I'll only slow you down with these injuries. Go. Save yourself.
I told you, it's my job to look after you.
And not like this.
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
So yeah, Resident Evil 2's aesthetics are a huge improvement over the first games, but there's a lot more to a game than just sound and graphics, so let's talk about the gameplay. The moment the player is given control in Resident Evil 2 is vastly different from the first game. There's no safe area or calm build-up here. The player is thrown directly into the action, from a burning wreck to being surrounded by zombies. Despite this, though, the game teaches you everything you need to know about Resident Evil before you even reach the first real section of the game. The streets of Raccoon City are fairly big, allowing a good amount of space to run past the zombies scattered along the way. There's less pressure to be tight with your movement, but this space gets smaller as you progress, which allows Resident Evil 2 to introduce you to one of the main mechanics of the game, that you shouldn't try to kill everything and just learn how to dodge sometimes. It's just not feasible to fight everything you encounter on your way to the police station. The first real scare you encounter is a set of 3 zombies banging on a locked fence. Instinctively drawn to the open passageway, you'll walk right past them, and then the gate flies open and they chase after you. The natural response is going to be to shoot them, and there's just enough ammo to take out all 3 of them. There's one zombie left in the area, though, but he's far enough off to the side that it's more beneficial to run past him than to shoot him. This trend continues a lot throughout this first part of the game, and it's a good primer for what you're going to have to deal with. Upon reaching the police station, it seems that it has a lot in common with the mansion from the original Resident Evil. Both buildings have multiple stories with a central hub in the center. Both make up the first half of the game, and both require you to solve a puzzle that uses 4 unique items to move on to the next section. Despite these similarities, though, the police station stands out from the mansion in many ways. The first of these being that the game is a little bit more direct in telling the player where to go as opposed to the first game. By unlocking the doors in the hub room, you're given access to an East Hall and a West Hall. The East Hall is overrun with a horde of zombies, so it's a little bit smarter to take the West one. This area actually has one of my favorite setups. Did you see it? I'll play it again. Yeah, that monster crawls across the window as you make your way to the door, and then in the next room you're treated to a unique camera angle that's used only once, hinting at whatever crawled by the window is watching you. This is really creepy, and it's a really interesting thing that wasn't experimented with in the first game. This creature is called a Licker, which is this version's game of the Hunter. The Licker is interesting because it shares many qualities with the Hunter, including a lunge and a quick swipe, but the most interesting part of it to me is how it operates. Having no eyes, the Licker senses things by touch and sound. It also gives off a heavy breathing noise which the Hunter lacked, giving a better warning to the player that there's one in the area. Lickers can actually be avoided by walking instead of running, assuming one hasn't already spotted you. In the first room, there's actually little shards of glass on the floor, and if you walk over those, it'll alert the Licker. It's a nice touch. However, there's a little bit more to this scene than just the Licker itself, so let's talk about that. Resident Evil 2 plays with the cinematics a lot more than the first game did, and in turn, this gives the game a much more dramatic feel. There are a lot more cutscenes, everything has one, from item pickups to character introductions, and this gives the game a much heavier focus on its story, which works well with the better constructed dialogue. Resident Evil 2 takes a lot of opportunities to drum out the drama, and because of this, its story is much more engaging and interesting. Let's get back to the area at hand, though. After this encounter, if the player continues to search the West Hall, they'll eventually stumble upon the STARS office, which gives a few hints to Chris's whereabouts. On top of that, the player is also given their second weapon. For Leon, this can be the Magnum or shotgun, and for Claire, it can be either the grenade launcher or bowgun. What weapon depends on what scenario. Whatever gun the player doesn't get can be obtained later in the game, also found in the police station. Now seems like a good time to talk about weapon balance, which is actually where just about all of the character balance in the game stems from. Now in the first Resident Evil, I talked about how the weapon loadouts help determine the difficulty, since Jill had access to the almighty grenade launcher while Chris didn't. Jill had 8 item slots while Chris had 6, but Chris had slightly more health. Resident Evil 2 does away with this concept. Both Leon and Claire can hold 8 items at once, and both take about the same amount of hits from zombies. Where these two differ is in their weapon choices. Leon has access to the shotgun and Magnum, on top of having a handgun that can hold 18 rounds. Claire, on the other hand, can use the grenade launcher, a 13-round handgun, and a new weapon called the bowgun. Leon packs more raw firepower, with the shotgun and Magnum killing most enemies in anywhere from 1 to 3 hits, while Claire has more versatility. The bowgun is pretty weak, lacking in the crowd control effect the shotgun offers, and leaves Claire without a way to deal with hordes of enemies until she gets the grenade launcher. The launcher actually received a bit of an overhaul in its ammo system. The regular explosive rounds now have a splash-like effect when they land. Flame rounds do damage over time, and acid rounds act like a Magnum in being a very powerful single shot. This approach to weapon balance is great. It actually affects how you can handle certain areas of the game as different characters, as opposed to gimping you like what happened in the first game. Near the end of the police station, the player meets their NPC partner. For Leon, this is Ada Wong, and for Claire, it's Sherry Birkin. This time around, the NPCs have a more narrative connection than they do gameplay. While they do have their segments where you play as them, the primary purpose of both Ada and Sherry is to keep Leon and Claire moving forward. Leon becomes infatuated with Ada and wants to escape from the city with her. And since the player finds information about Chris's whereabouts so early on, Sherry then acts as Claire's new priority. After completing the police department, the player moves on to the sewers, which is probably the shortest and worst area in the game. Clocking in at maybe around 10 minutes in length, the sewer is just one big puzzle that is artificially lengthened by not knowing to bring the valve used in the first part of the game. It does have the most entertaining boss battle, though. Overall, this area just serves as the weakest point in the game. It's pretty much there to just give backstory on how the city went to hell and where the player needs to go next to get out. Once the sewers are complete, though, the player will have their first encounter with William Birkin, the creator of the G-Virus and its current host. Throughout the game, the player is given hints about Birkin, building him up to be scary and unstoppable, which he kinda is. Unlike other bosses in the game, Birkin doesn't go down when you beat him. He flees and heals himself before showing up again later. Between the two scenarios in the game, you fight 6 total variations of the mad scientist as he grows and adapts, each form slightly more powerful and scary than the last. In the first scenario, this leads up to a 2-form battle that makes interesting use of the up and down aiming ability. It's a vast improvement over the first Resident Evil's penultimate fight, which didn't require you to do much more than run to the end of a hallway and shoot. After this fight with Birkin, the A scenario is over, and you're given access to the B scenario for the other character. So, Claire A unlocks Leon B, and vice versa. This is a really interesting concept because Resident Evil 2 treats the A and B scenarios like 2 stories happening at the same time, and things you do on Path A affect Path B. Did you blow up the alligator boss in the A scenario instead of just shooting him? Well, he's not going to be there in B then. There's a myriad of little things like this that can change. Others include whether or not you killed the zombified Officer Marvin, a hidden weapon stockpile, and a special room in the game's final area. Probably the biggest and most notable difference in Scenario B, though, is Mr. X. Dropped in by a helicopter while the player is still early into the police station, Mr. X is a Tyrant-class monster sent to find any remaining samples of the G-Virus, one of which happens to be in Sherry's locket. The way Mr. X works in-game, though, is that he appears at set spots in the scenario to try and stop the player from advancing. He pops up at seemingly random points and is so strong that it's better to avoid him than to try and fight him. There's even a little extra area before the final section of the game where the player is forced off an elevator because of him, and encounters him near a furnace that powers the whole laboratory area. The final fight with X has him without his trench coat in a fully mutated Tyrant form, and feels similar to the final battle of the first Resident Evil, complete with rocket launcher. Overall, X adds an interesting layer of depth to the game, and probably some of the scariest moments. After destroying the Tyrant, the game picks up where the A scenario ended, giving one last little section of gameplay before showing the true ending. The player is then taken to the results screen, which is a little bit more detailed than the first games. The game now has a grading system that is based around several different factors, like number of saves, total time taken to finish, and the amount of healing items used. The game's pretty lenient on the saving, though. I believe it takes about 7 to actually fall a grade. The grade serves not only as a push to your ego on how good you are, but also determines what you can unlock. The first is a series of special infinite ammo guns, including a rocket launcher, submachine gun, and a Gatling gun. Using any of these weapons detracts from your end result grade, but honestly they're just there for fun. After clearing both scenarios, the game gives the player a teaser about a special zombie that roams around the police department. By defeating this zombie, the player gets a key that unlocks 2 special costumes for Leon, and 1 costume for Claire as well as a new gun. I think these are some of my favorite bonuses in any Resident Evil game. One of Leon's costumes changes how he holds his handgun, giving him a faster rate of fire, and the handgun Claire picks up is shot from her hip, also giving her a faster rate of fire. I think the coolest part, though, is that if you ended a scenario wearing a costume, that character will appear in the corresponding one with it on. It's nice to be rewarded this way, with little things that give you a bit of an edge and also look cool at the same time. There are a couple of bonus modes, too, the first being Extreme Battle. Unlockable in all versions of the game outside of the original and the Nintendo 64, Extreme Battle is a new scenario that has you pick one of 4 characters to run through the game in reverse. Your goal is to collect a series of antivirus bombs to deal with the outbreak in the city. If you enjoy shooting zombies, then this mode is for you. There's enemies and ammo just about everywhere. I think I had over 36 Magnum bullets before I reached the police station, which I'm pretty sure is way more than what's in the main game. All the item boxes still work, but you're limited to 5 saves, so you have to plan carefully. This mode really is like a second quest, if you will. There's some stuff that gets me, though. Whoever planned the enemy layouts had a thing for placing groups of dogs in areas where it's hard to see them. Often I found myself getting stuck in a damage loop, where the dogs attacked in a pattern that prevented me from moving or retaliating. The next unlockable mode is called the Fourth Survivor, and is obtained by completing both the A and B scenario of a set with a grade of A on at least one of them. In the fourth Survivor, you play as an Umbrella operative codenamed Hunk, who was sent to recover the G-Virus from Birkin. This is the same guy who shows up in the cutscene halfway through the normal game. It's similar to Extreme Battle in that you're working your way through the map backwards, but not for as long, starting off in the sewers instead of the last area of the game. Hunk has a wide range of weapons at his disposal, but there's no ammo or health drops like in Extreme Battle. You're expected to make the short but dangerous trek through the police station without taking much damage, and let me say, it gets pretty crazy the farther along you get. The final mode is called Tofu Survivor, and is unlocked by playing one set of A and B scenarios 3 times while getting an A rank on at least one of them. Tofu Survivor is just the fourth Survivor scenario, except instead of Hunk, you play as a knife-wielding block of tofu. It's damn near impossible to complete unless you're a god of tank controls, but I'm pretty sure this was just meant to be a joke mode in the first place. Really, it's kind of creative and pretty hilarious. So that's it for Resident Evil 2. This really is one of my favorite games in the franchise, and probably one of my favorite games of all time. Much like the first Resident Evil, this game has a huge amount of ports, spanning all the major consoles out during its release as well as a PSN version. If I had to recommend any game in the series to somebody, this would be it. Resident Evil 2 has a lot more replayability than the first game, thanks to its unique take on the 2 character scenarios, as well as all the bonus unlockables. The game is a great example of what a sequel should be, in taking all the points of the first game and expanding on them as well as experimenting and doing its own thing every now and then. Hey, thanks for watching my video. The next big review will be over the final game in the Resident Evil PlayStation trilogy, Resident Evil 3, and you can click on the link over there whenever it's finally uploaded to go watch that. If you haven't seen my first review on the original Resident Evil, you can click over there to go to that. As always, if you enjoyed the video, give it a like and maybe leave a comment. And if you didn't like it, I guess you could leave a dislike and also hopefully leave a comment.